Salve, salve, Dirty Birds. E aí, fã de NFL. E aí, torcedor da Atlanta Falcons. Bem-vindos a mais um Falcons Play Action. Entrevista muito especial aqui com o Daniel Flick, para vocês que não conhecem ele aí. Ele é um dos insiders, um dos repórteres que cobre os Falcons para a Sports Illustrated, que é uma rede gigantesca lá dos Estados Unidos. E a gente vai conversar um pouquinho com ele aí sobre essa temporada dos Falcons e tudo mais, como que tá acontecendo tudo isso. So, hi Daniel, welcome man. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your accepting the invitation. We already had a couple of Falcons. We had Miles Garrett here in the beginning of the season. We had Scott Kennedy also to talk about the draft. So it's always nice to get the opinion from someone that is covering the day-to-day of the Falcons. And I think that your insights will be much appreciated here by the Falcons community. And please introduce yourself.
I appreciate the offer, the opportunity to come on and talk about the Falcons a little bit. Obviously, a lot to talk about. I'm honored to follow in the footsteps of some other very talented writers, reporters. Love Miles, love Miles. So hopefully I can match whatever he did on here, and I'm sure
absolutely.
I'm sure he set a high bar. So
absolutely.
So I got credentialed by the NFL in the spring. I got credentialed by the Falcons in the summer. So I have spent time in Flowery Branch and covering and asking questions, and within all these I guess practice after the game, all these pressers and things of that nature. So I've covered the team in person, and now I'm doing virtual at times. I can go to Atlanta whenever my editors and people want me, but I am so I cover the team. I produce articles every single day, and I guess some people enjoy reading what I have to say about Atlanta. So
sure,
pleasure to be on with you, man.
And if you want to follow Daniel, just go at by Daniel Flick on Twitter. I don't know if you have the Instagram, but if you have, I don't know if it is the same name. But Twitter by Daniel Flick, you have a lot of Falcons content over there. Yeah. So to be honest, when we started to have the conversation of scheduling this meeting, I thought this was going to be a very different conversation. Falcons were in a very different moment than what they are now. And to be honest, the entire expectation on the offseason was very different from what is happening right now. The mood between the Falcons community and the analysts and everything has changed a lot in the last 3 weeks, I would say, the last three games especially. And so let's just start with the hot topic of the moment. Do you think Arthur Smith will be the head coach in 24?
I think that's still to be determined. I think for now the answer is yes. I think that's where I would lean. I think what I was told over the summer is that it would take pure disaster for him to not be back in 24. And you look at it now and it's like 4-6, you've lost 3 in a row. It feels like it's pure disaster. No, it needs to be way worse than what it currently is. Unless of course, Arthur Blank kind of feeds into some of the outside talk that's happened, but he has historically not. So I tend to think that it would take a 5-12 type of year, 6-10. If they regress from last year's 7-10 mark, I think that's where Arthur Blank would legitimately consider it. But I think at the same token, Arthur Smith, what he's done inside, the walls of Flowery Branch, the culture he's established, a lot of people in that room are very confident in him. I tend to think that it's going to take a lot worse than what we've seen lately for him to legitimately lose his job. I don't think his seat is anywhere near as hot as a lot of people say that it is. Yeah. Just kind of knowing how Arthur Blank operates. And again, what I heard this summer from people who are in the know in that regard. So again, that could always change, but from what I know and from what I personally believe, I think he will be back in the saddle in 2024 as of right now, unless things just get drastically worse.
And I don't know if this helps to get his seat warmer or hotter or whatever, but do you feel that the treatment that he had with the press on the press conference on Monday on after the games, these kind of vague answers where he says a lot of things, but he doesn't mean anything with the answers? Do you think this contributes to this analysis or in some kind of way?
Yeah. Arthur's interesting because a lot of us within the media, within Falcons media, actually are pretty fond of him as an individual person. Like he's a good person. His media answers are, you can tell that he knows. It's kind of exactly what you mentioned. He knows how to say a lot without actually saying a lot. And I think, in a sense, if you want my honest take, which I'm sure you do, I don't really think he's got answers. I don't think he has answers for a lot of this stuff. I don't think he knows. Again, we can sit here and talk about what we think they'll, how they'll finish the year, things of that nature. I'm not sure he knows. I think he has an idea of the type of character they have in that locker room. But there's so much. I'm sure quarterback plays, is probably something we'll probably touch on a little bit later, but it's, he can't predict how that's, that's going to play out. And I think there's so much of what's going on. You can tell he's stressed. You can tell he's feeling some of the outside pressure. He said Monday that, you sign up for this job, understanding that, outside noise, outside criticism is a part of the job. But now that you're, really in the thick of it with people legitimately calling for your job, it's kind of a different animal. So I think he's feeling it a little bit. I think some of his answers kind of illustrate some of the concerns about, how ready is he to kind of make the changes that people feel like probably should be made? I'm not sure I would say fans are frustrated with what's happening on the field, and the answers that he's providing, or lack thereof, off the field aren't helping.
Exactly.
And so I think that is probably contributing in part to some of the outside expectation or outside perception around it. Because again, fans have questions and he's not really providing answers. And I know the entire week leading up, when they put Heineke in at QB and everyone's asking why, he only said a lot of variables. He never went in depth on that. And that's frustrating from where I'm at, because I have to tell people why, and I can't tell you why because they won't tell us why, and so that is frustrating. I think that's probably contributing in part to his outside perception. So, but again, I'm not sure there's much more that he can do, because I'm not sure that he knows in some of these things.
Yeah, and also one thing that I think that was a big factor was the expectation level from the past 2 years to this year. Like you went from a bottom 5 roster to a team that was supposed to go to the playoffs and dominate the division. So I think I don't know if he was prepared to this change of expectation, this bar of performance and these kind of things. But since you mentioned the QB, I saw that you had an article for this bye week that you were saying that probably Desmond Ridder will be QB1 again after the bye week. I don't know if this was more feeling or more analysis or anything, but like to get two in one here. What were your thoughts on the change from Ridder to Heineke? Do you think this is purely performance related, or was this anything regarding to the possible concussion that he was clearly to go back to the Titans game, but then he didn't? And how do you feel about Ridder having basically to save the season? Do you think that this time on the bench and preparing a bye week could help him to develop and cut off a little bit of the turnovers and be a more accurate QB, a more productive QB in this Arthur Smith system?
Yeah. So kind of to revisit the article on Monday, as you mentioned, I think that it's, I think a lot of people within that room kind of agreed with me too, that heard his answers and the way that he said things and how he answered questions about Ridder and Heineke. I tend to think that Arthur is leaning towards Ridder. And then I also just think that on paper, from what we've seen with Heineke and what we've seen with Ridder, it's more worthwhile that they invest in Ridder and letting him prove what his future can be in the NFL. And so it's kind of a mixture of things for why I think he ultimately ends up starting on Sunday of next week. But I think the reasoning behind the benching, I think what happened, Ritter's concussion played a part in it. I think initially, Heineke coming in, he scored 20 points in that second half in Tennessee, either the highest scoring or second highest scoring half they had all year. And I think Arthur Smith felt that he's kind of just he had to let Heineke see what he could do. And then he comes out against Minnesota. They have their highest scoring. I think that 28 points that game, highest scoring mark this season.
I think of the season.
Yeah. And so you kind of start to put some of that together. You couldn't bench him after that. They weren't planning on it anyways, in my understanding. But it's the situation of you see now what Heineke is, and you see that he's not really elevating the ceiling of that offense much higher than what Ridder did. And I think really I think they wanted Ridder to have a chance, because again, last year his situation was so bizarre to where he didn't really play until he started, and then now he's only started. I think it's kind of it was refreshing for him. The word that they kept using was a good reset, a mental reset, kind of let him see the game from a new perspective. He still led all this stuff, all the meetings off the field. I think it could be a very valuable experience for him. And I think at the end of the day, his turnovers and the lack of red zone execution that they had time and time again, and especially his last 3 to 4 starts, really became a big problem, even as his passing efficiency and production improved. And I think he proved that he can push the ball and move an offense deep into the opponent's territory. He couldn't finish drives, and he was really struggling with other aspects of that as far as holding on to the football. And I think that the time away can only be positive in that regard. It can only help him see things from a newer light, see it maybe from Arthur Smith's perspective, which I think will be a very big help for him. Perhaps maybe in some of the pregame scripting processes that they have. So I do think he'll be changed. I don't think he'll be the same player he was before. Whether that's evident, that's another topic. But I think that he's not the same guy that he was 2-3 weeks ago. I think on paper, it can only be a positive for him. He showed against Arizona he's still confident. And I think that's the only question you have is after you lose that job, where's your head at? His head looked like it was in the right spot. And so I think it's an optimistic time for him. I think if he can play at the level that he was efficiency-wise in that 3-game stretch prior to Tennessee, where he was averaging 297 yards a game, second most in the league behind Patrick Mahomes, and you can eliminate some of those I think he had 5 or 6 interceptions, like a 3-game stretch. He had 3 fumbles mixed in there, 4 fumbles mixed in there. If you eliminate that, you keep that production, you're talking about a legitimately encouraging young quarterback who can with the current state of the NFC South turn around the entire season.
Yeah, like it's crazy to think that if the Falcons beat the Saints next week, they are division leaders. So
yeah.
So this is what it's the most crazy part. And like I know that you said that probably a 5-12 or a 6-11 season would be the thing that would get Arthur Smith fired. And like for that not to happen, for the team to have a winning, let's say a winning second half, after bye, winning type of schedule, what changes do you think that are coming? Do you think that we'll see more targets to Kyle Pitts, more I don't know, a scheme change, or it will be more related to the mental aspect of the team and these kind of things?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. I tend to think in regards with the Kyle Pitts aspect, I'm not sure anything will really change there. I think if it would have changed, we probably would have seen it change earlier. Really, it's been kind of the same problem for the last year and a half. And so I'm not sure we'll see anything drastically change there. Arthur mentioned after they lost last weekend that there will not be any staff changes coming. So there won't really be anything schematically or structurally changing very much. I think what it's going to come down to ultimately, leadership on that team, finding a way to kind of turn some of the internal energy. And it's hard, when you lose a leader like Grady Jarrett, who was so impactful with what they wanted to do off the field as much as he was on it. It's hard. It's really challenging. And I think if you factor in that, you factor in, 3 straight losses. It's a tough time mentally to remember why you had so much preseason optimism. You have to really rally around each other. I think they have the right pieces in that locker room. Arthur Smith has mentioned that seemingly every weekend after every game, that they have the right pieces in there. It's just going to come down to whether or not, I think offensively, can you execute in the red zone? Ritter, can you take care of the football, assuming that he is in fact the guy that they choose to start a quarterback, which I think that he will be. We'll find out Monday, of course, but I tend to think that it will be Ritter. Can you just find ways to score? At the end of the day, you got to finish drives. Because again,
exactly.
Offensively, they had 3 straight games of 400 plus yards for the first time since
the problem was the red zone efficiency.
Yeah. Offensively, they were moving the football. They couldn't finish drives. So can you finish that? Can you find that way? I tend to think we'll see a little bit more. I think the way that they use Bijan Robinson, especially against Arizona, and the way that they were involving him more within the red zone is something they'll try to focus on a little bit more towards the end of the year. And I think as well, they've been so focused on trying to get him to the end of the year. And I think they're now kind of realizing like, hey, we have to use him more now. And okay, it's time. It's time. And so I think you'll see him take on a little bit larger role. I think passing offense wise, I do think Pitts and London will start to see a little bit more of the load there, but I think a lot of the change will mainly be probably off the field leadership stuff, trying to keep that energy high or at least regain where the energy was. And I think you'll see more touches for Robinson as well, especially in the red zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think that one of the aspects that, because to be honest, I don't know. I know what the path is for the Falcons to regain confidence and regain the victories and these kind of things. I just don't know if we're able to do that without any structural change or without any scheme changes. To be honest, so do you think, because I know that Arthur Smith has a lot of respect from the players, do you think it's possible for him to lose the locker room between these 7 final games?
Is it possible? Yeah, I do think it's possible. I think especially if they continue to struggle and if they lose out, because again, when you have such high expectations, I think it's a natural human emotion to start to think of like, hey, what's the problem? And then you naturally look at the top and you're like, that guy's leading us. Why aren't we better? But I do think as well, one thing that I walked away, and every time that I cover Atlanta, I feel the professionalism in that locker room and the quality of individuals they have on that team. And there is a lot of they have a lot of respect for Arthur Smith. They are very fond of him. They play very hard for him. There's a reason the last 2 years when they've gone 7-10, and in a way it felt like they kind of outperformed maybe the talent that they had, and maybe in some of the especially
absolutely.
key spots. Yeah, they were playing hard for him. They scrapped for him. They played all 60 minutes for him. I don't think he's lost them. I think they are still very much so engaged and behind him. And it's hard, as you mentioned 3 weeks ago. There are several other topics we're talking about here. And I think one of my favorite quotes from this year, I think Chris Lindstrom said it after the game in London. Within the NFL, it's never as good as it seems. It's never as bad as it seems. And unless the sky legitimately falls out and they lose like 6 of the last 7 games, or they, whatever it may be, they just cannot turn the year around, then I think you'll start to see some people inside that locker room say like, hey, is this guy really the right guy for us? But as of right now, I don't think that's a huge conundrum for them. I do think there is an avenue to where maybe it becomes one, but I don't think that's really close to happening as of right now.
Yeah, it makes sense. And like we thought about the possible change of head coach, but I think one that is much more likely to happen unless something very, very which would be an excellent thing turn around from Reader to prove that he's a franchise QB for the Falcons. But let's say that the same production from Reader keeps in these final 7 games. Do you think that we have a quarterback change? Like, this is a very futuristic question to try to guess the future. But if we have a quarterback change, do you think that Fontenot has the aggressiveness to go up in the draft, or do they go with a veteran because Arthur Smith would be in a hot seat in 24? How do you feel about all this situation?
Yeah. My personal take on this, I think they would pursue the veteran route. I don't think Ridder, again, if you don't see if Ridder can't fix his turnover issues, I don't think he's back in that role. He might be back in Atlanta. I don't think he's back in that role.
Oh yeah, absolutely. For me, he fulfills his contract as a backup.
Yeah. So I tend to think that it becomes more interesting if he can keep that, 297.3 passing yards that he was on that 3-game stretch, weeks 5 to 7. If he can keep that, reduce, again, he's not going to entirely eliminate some of these issues he's had holding on to the football, but if you can
just turn it into acceptable.
Yeah,
just turn it into acceptable.
Exactly. Yeah, put it at a respectable, acceptable clip. Exactly. And so if you can do that, again, they love what he brings off the field. He is a stellar leader. The entire locker room respects him as a person, as a leader, as an individual, And so I think that if he can prove over the next 7 games, because as we kind of mentioned, he has a chance here to change the entire narrative around Atlanta's season. If you lead them into the playoffs in a convincing fashion and you are playing at a high level, there's no way that he is not back next year. So, but again, I think there's a very real avenue he takes them into the playoffs. But again, that's where you kind of reach that gray area of how well
it's wait and see. Yeah, it's wait and see.
But hype route is where I personally would prefer to go.
Yeah,
but again, Arthur Smith would probably be back unless, again, they just are completely terrible. Arthur Smith's probably back. You're going into year 4. You need to win. Are you trusting a rookie quarterback with that? That's a tough thing to really put all your chips behind, I feel like. So I think they lean the veteran route. I think Ryan Tannehill is a guy a lot of people have mentioned. I don't think that's
No, please.
I don't
No.
think that's. I'd be surprised if that happened. I'm sure they'll look into it, but I'd be surprised relative. I struggle seeing it happen. That's more of a me take than me like.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's. I tend to think that they would pursue the veteran route, just trying to find anything that they can. It's going to be interesting. I think they like Ritter. They want Ritter to be that guy so bad. And he's got a great chance now to prove that he's changed, to prove that he can lead this organization, to prove that he can be that guy. They want him to be. And I think he's talented enough. Again, he's proven that he can succeed and be productive as an NFL starting quarterback. Can he put it all together? He's got 7 games left. And I think he's got what it takes to do it. It's just now a matter of execution. And I think that's ultimately, I mentioned in that article Tuesday that he has a chance. I think this is playing for his career as a starting QB in the NFL. If he can't prove this is probably his last chance. So I would like to think that you will see him play as aggressively as he possibly can, knowing that the way that he plays controls his own fate and potentially the way that the organization plays out for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that was it. Thank you very much for the answer. I think it was a great conversation. As I said before, in 3 weeks ago, it would be a very different one, but it is what it is. Very different situation right now, but Falcons has a clear path to turn around this season. The only thing is, will they be able to execute it or not? So let's see. This Saints game for me is going to dictate a lot for the other 6 games. If you have a good win against your biggest rival at home, I think the energy on Flower Bench will turn around completely. So once again, thank you very much for accepting the invite, for your contribution. I think that the Brazilian community of NFL will really appreciate, especially the Falcons one. So I just wrap it up here in Portuguese, and then we are done. Once again, thank you very much. If you want to follow Daniel, go at by Daniel Flick on Twitter to see his insights about the Falcons. Very good content. I really recommend it. Pessoal,
Awesome.
Então é isso. Obrigado pela atenção. Daniel, cara que entende muito de NFL e ainda mais dos Falcons, então acho que ele agregou muito à discussão. Então a gente nos vê no próximo episódio. Um abraço e até mais.